I had just graduated grammar school, no, high school, and I was on my way, not on my way, I was registered to go to college in January. We were in a movie theater that Sunday, and all of a sudden they shut off the movie in the middle of everything and said Pearl Harbor was bombed. And the theater emptied out immediately. I went home and talked it over. I was only 17 years old at the time, and as I say, I was enrolled in Newark College of Engineering in Newark, New Jersey, because that's where I lived, and I started school in January. In January, they decided, because the war had come about, to accelerate the program, namely that you entered in January, you went through the summer, and September the 1st, you became a sophomore. About a couple months later, a group of people came to register people for the war, because I had turned 18 in May. And they came in, and at which time I decided to join the Army. They said if you joined, you would be given a deferment for a couple of months to finish off your second term, which would end at the end of April of the following year, and then you would go into service. As it happened, just as they said. Well, we went into service, and I went to Camp Fannin in Tyler, Texas. It was a brand new camp. Texas was being populated by the fact that they had all this land and they were able to build these camps. Very interesting thing. So in May, I went together with most of the fellows I was in college with, and a lot of other fellows I was in college with. We went down to Camp Fannin, Texas, at which time they gave you a series of tests. And one of the tests was an IQ test. And if you came out at that time, I think the score was anything over 129, they would consider you for the ASTP program. Well, we finished basic training, and in September, they sent me to the University of Delaware. I stayed in Delaware from September till the following April. The following April, they said, we're breaking up the program. In effect, it really was the fact that Roosevelt knew that he was going to go into Europe, and he needed he needed enough men to be able to back up whatever the invasion took. So from there, when they broke it up, they sent us to a line infantry company, namely the 104th Division, which is very interesting because of the fact that the Major General at that time was Terry Allen. Terry Allen was the general who commanded the famous Red One in Africa, but he was not liked by Bradley. He went into Sicily, and when they captured Sicily, they he allowed the men to run wild for one day. He gave them a day off from training or from the war when they captured Sicily, and they ransacked the main town there. And when they did, Bradley was going to really demote him. But Terry had a friend. His name was George C. Marshall, who, in effect, to be truthful, he should have run the European operation, not Eisenhower. Marshall was more fit to be the Supreme Commander at that point. This is just my opinion. Anyway, Terry came back to the States, and they gave him the 104th Division. Terry was a great general, well-loved, and respected. You know, there's a difference between love and respect. Anyway, Terry trained us from April until August. August, we all got on a train from Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, went directly up into Canada, went clean across Canada, came down through Niagara Falls, came through the Newark train station. I was going to tell them to please stop the train. It's time for me to get off and go home, but they kept going. Very interestingly, we got on a boat at Staten Island. It was called the George Washington. The George Washington was the old Bremen. And we went overseas from there. We as a company had KP the entire trip, and we slept above the waterline, and it made things more comfortable. September 1st, we landed it was a huge convoy. At no time did we ever see the end of the convoy. In addition to which, the British had 3 destroyers weaving in and out of the convoy. And the interesting thing was that they would only dump garbage at night, being leery of U-boats. We got over to Cherbourg, and we climbed down rope ladders onto barges, and the barges pushed us into land. From there, we were bivouacked at a town called Valognes. Very pretty chateau, and we pitched tents completely around the chateau. And we guarded the Red Ball Highway. When Patton broke out at St. Lo, and this was planned by them, what happened, St. Lo was the point of being a critical battle to allow Patton to break through and go directly to the Siegfried line. But as luck would have it, they ran out of supplies. And the only way they could supply Patton, they figured, was bringing it in, putting it on roads that were designated specifically for Patton. It was called the Red Ball Express. Well, we guarded the Red Ball Highway for a couple of weeks. Then they must have figured, and this is pure conjecture, I wasn't let in. At that time, I was still a private. They didn't consult me, but they wanted to take, the big push was Antwerp. They figured if they got Antwerp, they'd be able to supply whatever they had. As it is, Patton ran out of supplies on the Siegfried line anyway. But as a unit, we got on 40 and 8 trains and went from right outside Cherbourg to a town called Mechelen, Belgium. Mechelen, Belgium, we joined with a Polish brigade from the British Army, and then we took over from the British Polar Bear Division their foxholes in a town outside of a town in Holland. The only place I remember very vividly was the battle in Enten-Leur, that was in Holland. I know we came through Breda and various other towns around there. From there, we fought up to the Moss River, including the outside of the Walcheren Islands. The Walcheren Islands were a group of islands that actually surrounded Antwerp. You had to come through the islands to get to Antwerp. And when they fell, they took us by truck back to Aachen, and we went into the Hurtgen Forest. I did not know at that time the severe battle that had taken place in Hurtgen. But from there, we fought across the middle of Germany from Hurtgen, Stolberg, into Eschweiler, Westweiler, and from there we went into Emden, which was a good-sized town. Then meanwhile, Terry Allen had devised a method of fighting at night. We became known as the night fighters. Now, efficiency it wasn't, because there was a lot of chaos. We didn't have walkie-talkie radios, we didn't have night scopes or any of the modern equipment. But by like token, it saved a lot of lives in fighting at night. The biggest problem we had was, after we took Indian, our company was told we're going into a small town called Pierre, P-I-E-R. It was wonderful, wonderful. What was wonderful about it is we had to leave at 10 o'clock in the morning, and our captain said, there's nothing in front of you, so normally we fight at night, but we're going in the daytime. Let me back up something. Outside of Eschweiler, there was a huge power plant, and they told us we're going to take the power plant. We left about 4:30 that night. We went down, under the protection of a small hill, we went down into the back part of this huge power plant. We got inside. Once we got inside, chaos took place. I ended up in a courtyard underneath a steel plate while we're getting shelled. Well, there was another guy named Red Brown who came and he ducked under this plate with me, but the shrapnel kept bouncing off the plate, but we were well protected. It was just leaning up and sufficient enough to cover us pretty good. But I said to Red, we hang out here, we're going to get killed. There's a train. They had a coal tender. It was off the tracks. I said, let's get to the coal tender. That'll give us better protection of what we have out here. Can't get out in the open. So we ran like hell and jumped into, it was like a grease pit underneath this coal tender. Evidently the train kept getting hit, but it just rattled enough, but it stayed steady to protect us. The funny thing about that is, with all this hell breaking loose, Red fell asleep. He fell asleep. Here I hear the snore, and I turn around, there's Red, he's out cold. And nice guy, Red, couldn't read and write. And he told us years ago, we were kids. He was about 32, I was 18 or 19, and he told us how he came into the Army. He was caught for moonshining in Missouri, and the judge said to him, you have your choice. Either you go to the Army, you go to jail. So he said, listen, I got 3 kids to support. I'm going to the Army. So he came to the Army. He was the greatest guy in the world. He brushed his teeth with vodka every morning. He was a pretty good guy. Loved him, very sweet man. Little thing. Anyway, Red, we get through, and sure enough, all of a sudden, we see the rest of the company coming toward us across the courtyard. This was about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. And we saw all these dead Germans. What happened? What happened was that the captain got most of the company into the basement of the factory, and he and I, Field Artillery Observer, called what they called airbursts down on a group of Germans that assembled in the courtyard. They killed 84 Germans. The next day we got written up in Newsweek. A man named Al Newman came up, and in December of '44, there's an article called "They Fight by Night," and it discussed the battle. Now the sad thing is, apropos of the fact from Oregon, the forward artillery observer was Warren Conrad. He was a lieutenant. Great guy. He got killed a week later by a short round from an American artillery piece. Really very, very sad, very sad. Anyway, from there, going into Pierre, getting back to what I talked about, we started 10 o'clock in the morning. There were 2 companies, A and B. C was in reserve. And I think it was in reserve anyway. They didn't ask me for the big picture. We just ran into guys from A. We go across this beet field, beautiful beet field, well manicured. And here was a huge, big heap of sugar beets all over the place. Well, by the way, will this be able to run continually? Okay. There's these sugar beets. Well, we got halfway across the damn field, and the sugar beets turned out to be machine gun nests. And they opened up on us. They cut the hell out of the company. I remember there was a road alongside the sugar beet. I remember running toward the road, and someone hollered, "Let's go back." I says, "You go back, you're gonna get killed. Let's take a chance and go forward." So we ran across, there was a little ditch along the side of the road. So we crouched into the ditch and ran along there up into the town of Pierre. We got into Pierre. There was a row of houses. By that time, it was getting late in the afternoon. It was 3 or 4 o'clock. And at that time of the year, it started to get dark around 4 o'clock, which we were lucky at. Sure enough, all of a sudden we hear a tremendous rumbling. What was it? It was a self-propelled mound. A self-propelled mound, my best explanation of it is the fact that it's an artillery piece on a tank base. It cannot traverse 360 degrees. It has to be a certain way when it fires. Otherwise, it can't do it. There's not enough stability. Well, it went down to the first house along this row, put the barrel in the basement and fired. And a lot of guys got hurt. Well, a lot of guys kept running out of that building. Sure enough, it did the same thing 2 or 3 houses down. I was in a house with a man named Al Rocklets from Minneapolis. Al says to me, "That son of a bitch is coming down here, and if we don't do something, we're going to get killed." He said, "Listen, there's a Panzerfaust here. That's a one-shot bazooka that the Germans had." He says, "I know how to fire it." He says, "I'm going to go out there and get him." I said, "Gee, Al, that's great." He said, "You don't understand something. I ain't going alone." That was nice of him, very sweet. Here's this thing that looks like a house moving down with a huge artillery piece, and the 2 little jerks are going to go out there and take this thing out. But Al knew what he was doing. And there was a 3rd guy there, Jerry Batchelder. Jerry says, "I'm not staying here alone. You guys are going." We were the only 3 in the house. So we crawled outside. We got behind an outhouse. And sure enough, it was enough light to see exactly what the hell this thing looked like. And it was big. It was as big as this room, I swear to God. It really was, moving toward it. And I'll let them have it. Nobody came out of that thing. Nobody. In fact, I kept talking it up, and Al got a medal for that one. He deserved it. But we got cut up so bad. We were online for 7 weeks at that point, and we hadn't taken showers. Meanwhile, they figured it was time to relieve us. So they took us back to Aachen. What was left of us was quite a few casualties. It was the worst casualty battle we ever had. Sure enough, we get back to Aachen, and you get undressed, and they took showers in this huge, it was an old factory, good-sized factory. Oh, I would estimate it at, several hundred feet across. And it had the plumbing, and there were shower heads. And we all started to take showers. In the middle of the shower, everybody, all of a sudden the guy goes through blowing a whistle. "Everybody out, everybody out, we're getting out of here." What happened? It was December either 15th or 16th. The bulge hit. When the bulge hit, we got out of the shower real fast. They gave us clean clothes, And there was quite a bit of clothes because we had cottons, we had woolen underwear. On top of that, you had fatigues. On top of the fatigues, you had oversized ODs, woolens. On top of that, you had a sweater, you had a field jacket, you had an overcoat. You wondered how the hell you could move, but that was enough protection for the winter. On top of that, they gave you new shoes and clean socks. And we gathered up. It was with the 3rd Armored Division was there too. And there was so much tumult with the 3rd Armored moving around with the tanks. They formed us up and we started to walk. We walked and walked all night. They did not stop. They didn't care if you fell out. In fact, the distinctive thing I remember is we walked, a lot of guys fell asleep walking. And the funny thing about it, you could still continue to walk while you're sleeping. And if the column, for some reason, stopped or slowed up, you heard all this clanging. What was it? Everybody's helmet was hitting the guy in front of them. Well, we walked from there to the Ruhr River, and we replaced the 9th Division in a town called Rosdorf. Rosdorf was right on the Ruhr River. Well, we stayed on the Ruhr River for a few weeks, and as we stayed there, the big thing came about that the hierarchy wanted to send out patrols to get a prisoner. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to cross the river, you're going to tap a guy on the shoulder and say, my captain wants to see you. And they'd be more than willing to run back with you. You know, this was a great thing. By that time, I had been promoted to sergeant because I became a squad leader. And the only reason I accepted that job was I was carrying a bazooka at that time, and it was very cumbersome. Not only did you carry the bazooka, your rifle, the bandoliers of ammunition, grenades hanging from your overcoat and from your cartridge belt, but the fact that you were given 3 rounds of bazooka ammunition and you had another guy carrying the other 3 rounds. Let me tell you, with all the clothes and with that, it was a little difficult to move. In fact, one of the problems I had was when they first gave me the bazooka, we got shelled, and I went to hit the ground. Well, the bazooka was on my shoulder. The strap caught. Everybody else was flat on the ground, and I was at a 45-degree angle. I figured this wasn't going to work too often because it was about time that I saved my own butt.